Hey everyone, Tactics here, continuing my Advanced Mythic Plus Guide series for Season 2 of Dragonflight, where in this video I'll be going through a timed plus 23 tyrannical freehold key that we did on Sanguine Week, discussing how we routed through the dungeon, what we did to handle the various trash and boss pulls, and even going over a couple mistakes that we made and how to not make them yourself. As a reminder here, the route is definitely not made with pugging in mind. Instead, it's aimed at more coordinated groups looking to push higher keys. But if you are looking for something a bit more basic, I do have a series going over easy to execute routes for every single dungeon over on my channel, which I'll also link down in the description below if you want to check those out. Otherwise, let's get started here, where of course we're doing that nice big triple pull right at the start of the key. A little tip for grouping the pack that can be a little bit easier for you is that if you actually don't move at all until about 1 to 2 seconds on this initial start timer, the RP won't trigger until you start moving, so the enforcer with the two massives won't start patrolling down the path until you actually move. There's something that can potentially be useful. You see, we aren't actually even going to be doing it here. It's already padding down because one of us moved, but if you don't move, you can actually control that this pad will come down. If you move around 2 seconds, it'll be like here, and then it'll be a nice easy group. But right off the top here, I'm going to be moving over to the crack shot, because out of this 3-pack, there's only one stationary mob, and that's the crack shot. So I group up the pack here. One little tip is if range actually moved over a little bit slightly, they could be baiting the actual bird poop that comes down. You're going to see the first bird poop, because we have to move from out of that bomb. The first bird poop is going to come down on the melee. If this range had moved over just slightly instead, we would be baiting the poop out there and wouldn't be nearly as dangerous for me and the rogue. But luckily it is just the tank and the rogue in our group that are in melee, so it's not a big deal. Watching here, the mastiffs, those are always going to be the first ones to die in this pack. So moving around with sanguine around this puddle. And the big thing is just making sure we didn't sanguine that crack shot, right? Because we don't have a way to obviously move. We're not a death grip, right? So the only way to get them is a knock. And because our knocks, it's just easier if you don't sanguine them in the first place, right? So big triple pull there. Notice we did not commit lust. On a fort week, we probably would commit lust. But what we want to lust actually is phase 1 of the boss here. And I'll talk about that in a second. But otherwise, running through little LOS here for the grouping up of this pack. Again, the crack shot being a little delayed, unfortunately. But the big thing here is making sure we do not sanguine this crack shot. These guys can be a little bit annoying because they're going to start to run, as you see in a second here. Which, a little bit of a pain, but not the end of the world. It just does extend this pull slightly here. We're just going to go into the next pack. And you really do want to be watching this Vile Bombardment timer, right? Because there's a lot of pain going out. The puddles do a ton of damage on this hierarchy. So you saw the rogue there basically get killed from like 60% HP by the Vile Bombardment. So you really want to be careful of those. And you can actually completely avoid the damage, but it does kind of require you to be aware of the actual timer and of course who the actual target is. There is a way to predict that on the boss fight itself. It's a little less predictable during the trash. It basically targets the person closest to where the bird is. So if you have eyes on the bird and that kind of thing, you can kind of see where the bombardment's going to come out. But I'll talk about that a bit more on the boss. So this was a double pull here. It was the patrol we pulled along with the pack right there. So the patrol plus the double enforcer pack is what we did there. Oh, that's too far for the boss. And then these guys, the two enforcers, are what the RP for the boss is tied to. They, of course, are also the highest health mobs in the group. So unless you hard focus them, there's not really a ton you can do to actually get this boss to spawn a little quicker here. But right off the top here, the scariest part of this boss fight is for sure the first phase because of those pistol shots. Now, those pistol shots deal a ton of damage. You're going to see here. Basically, it's not going to one-shot, but any two will one-shot. If he ever picks the same person back-to-back, they will die, and you can see it deals like 80% of their HP, right? So you basically need to make sure the person that just got shot, so at the end, like Dragon Nugget there, Sim, if Dragon Nugget wasn't at that HP, if he was just a little bit lower, he would have been dead if that picked him again, right? So basically, you need to make sure you're consistently topping players here after each pistol shot, because you saw that 3 pistol shots went out in a row before a charge. If any of them had picked the same person twice, it would have been bad news, right? So just making sure we're topping people, getting people topped. That was through a defensive, luckily. Now there was 2 pistol shots, and now because we're below 75% HP, we don't need to worry about that. That's definitely one of the harder parts of this fight, because we're going to kind of show you how to get through the rest of this fight more easily. Now, you saw I put the boss on this edge initially for the 75% push. That's on purpose. So bird's going to jump off and go to the edge of the room here. I'm going to go over towards this way, and this is where we're going to tank the boss. And so what's going to happen from here on out, basically, is we make sure we're staggered like this, so that way when any random player gets targeted by the powder shot, it's not going to hit ideally more than one player, because again, we just want to be able to dispel that quickly. Now, the bird's going to come out, and basically what's going to happen now after this dive bomb, so the bird's always going to dive across now this way. And what's going to happen is the bird will dive across, and then the bird is going to use a Vile Bombardment. And again, like I mentioned, Vile Bombardment always targets the closest player. So if you have a ranged player baiting over here around this triangle marker, every single poop will target them, which means that melee never needs to move. Melee can AFK here, and as you can see, like they're both like kind of on this side of the boss as well to bait bombardments, or not bombardments, rather the powder shots that way and not hit the range. And meanwhile, this range knows that they're going to be targeted, so they can actively move a little bit. They can even pre-move. I think he does it later on. Right at this point, the dive bomb's going to come in 3 seconds here. Dive bomb across the room, like I said. They're going to be the closest target over here. Oh, that is a perfect example. Yes. Okay. Take three. Dive bomb. All right. Dive bomb is going across here. He knows he's being targeted. He can dash out immediately and take no damage. There we go. We did it. 0 damage, basically. So because that one person basically knows they're always going to be the target of the Vile Bombardment, they can always move as the Vile Bombardment timer is coming out, and they can entirely avoid the damage. So that's kind of the goal of this positioning here. It also means melee never needs to move, and again, it only means one range needs to do it. So obviously we have a Holy Paladin in this group, but it could be your healer in theory. It could be any range DPS, or just as long as one player is around in this area, making them the closest target to the Vile Bombardment every time the bird dashes across like this. That's the goal, right? And always the bird will rotate around clockwise around the room, which is why we're safe on this half of the room as the melee. But from here, we are going to be doing a little skip on this Enforcer here. So what you can do if you don't have a Warlock is basically the Rogue pegs this guy and goes up along this side, and we're just all going to run through now. The Rogue's then going to jump off the edge, and that guy's going to try and pat back, and he's just going to vanish here. Any class that has a combat drop can do this, so Hunter, Mage can do it as well. Night Elves can do that as well, so any of those will work. We're then going to run around here, do a skip. You can just mind soothe these guys. I think you can actually even just walk. You don't even need to wait for a shroud. We just wait for safety, but I'm pretty sure you can actually just hug this wall without shroud or mind soothe and avoid them. And we're going to do a nice big pull down here near the boss. Nothing too crazy in this pull. Honestly, there's like one kick with the brine scale, and then the rats are the really scary guy, because this is a healing reduction that stacks up on the tank, so you want to try and nuke them down relatively quickly. We do also kind of add on the yellow non-hostile mobs right near the boss as well, and then we're going to go straight into the boss fight. Nothing too crazy about this pull. Yeah, straight into the boss fight here. This boss fight, so it is extremely valuable here to have either a paladin or a monk in your group to deal with the blackout barrels. Basically, these are barrels that are going to target a random player. And something to note about these barrels is that they won't necessarily go on to the person it's targeted at. If that person does like a dash while the barrel is in the air and it makes them no longer the closest person to the barrel, it'll jump on the next closest person. So be careful with that. Don't try and move too much if you're going to use like a paladin or a monk on this barrel, because basically what you can do is you can freedom the targeted player, or after they have the barrel, you can Tiger's Lust the targeted player, and it actually removes the barrel from them entirely, so they can now move freely. You don't need to focus the barrel whatsoever. It saves you quite a bit of damage over the course of the fight, because it means you never need to actually kill any of these barrels, because like now everyone's just leaving. There's no one actually in this barrel whatsoever. It's just kind of hanging out there. Other things to try and take advantage of are these swirlies, of course. Bad brews are the green ones. The green ones, if you put the boss in, they'll take a bit of damage. The good brews are the blue ones. If you stand in them yourself, you will get a crit or haste buff. So this one right there, it doesn't matter that the boss is in it. It will not affect the boss, but it gives you a nice little buff, which is something you should try and get, as at least your entire party should be trying to get as much as possible, and staying out of those green one in the process. The other thing to maybe talk about a bit here is going to be Eudora's grape shot. So basically, that's when she jumps away, and this is probably where I see the most people die in general in groups. She's going to jump away, and the thing to note now is she will always shoot from her left to her right. So if you're looking at Eudora, it's going to be the right side of her going all the way to the left side of her. So you're going to see everyone's moving in this direction here because she's going to start shooting down this way and rotate around in an arc. It will always work that way. So you can always be aware of that. And that's how you can avoid. So everyone ran around and behind the boss like that to not get any hits or stacks of the dot from the grape shot. Again, if you do the next one here, she'll always jump out in a couple seconds here. We'll watch. And it's always going to start from this way and then go around in an arc like that. Always, 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 it will shoot from her left to her right. That's how you can make sure you never get a tick. And outside of that here, again, looking all of a stack inside of that brew, and we're just going to focus on Eudora because as soon as Eudora is dead, we're actually going to start adding trash onto this boss fight. Again, taking advantage of not only cleave onto the boss, but also the fact that we're getting crit and haste buffs during this boss fight, right? So as much trash as you can do with this boss, it's going to be beneficial because you're going to be buffed up, right? Or at least a decent portion of it buffed up. So we're going to kill Eudora here, and our healers run over and added a pack of trash. I'm going to get the aggro on them, group them all up in the middle, and you now no longer need to really worry about dodging that grape shot, right? So you're now only worried about the circle brew around the boss. And so we can focus on this trash pack. It is Sanguine week, so you really don't want to Sanguine up this boss, right? So you want to be careful of that. So we're still prioritizing the boss damage here, and that's the reason why we pulled this pack in particular. It's double Scrapper, Harpooner, Buccaneer, right? So a lot of these guys aren't very dangerous, assuming you stop the Scrappers and you just walk out of the Buccaneer. The Harpooner in this pack is not really going to murder you. So again, relatively benign pack, and we're using Nox here when these guys start getting low stuns to keep them out, to make sure that we never get a Sanguine puddle on Raoul, because sanguining a boss is exceptionally bad, right? You do not want to do that. We don't care that we sanguine up the trash a tiny bit, that's not a big deal, but we really don't want to sanguine up the boss. So again, we're going to use Nox here when they're low, and we're probably going to be using stuns or anything we can, kidneys, to keep those mobs away from the actual boss, to drop those sanguine puddles away, and we're just going to finish off the boss here. After the boss dies, we are going to move up to the left here around the green marker, and we're actually going to go up. So this is actually a double pull right here. You can't quite see it, but basically the patrol that walks up and down this path, there's also a little pack right here that they're patrolled directly on top of in this moment, and we are going to double pull this pack together here. Again, relatively not super scary pull. There's the 2 brand skills from the patrol itself. There's no more in this pack. There is a bunch of knife jugglers though, so there's a decent chunk of random damage going out. But otherwise, this mob is, or this pack rather, is not too scary for other players. Of course, all of these packs in this area of the dungeon are going to be relatively scary for all tanks just because it's so heavy in auto attack damage. So be aware of that, tank players. This whole area is basically going to smash your face in. And there's nothing you can, there's no like predictable like tank busters you need to be scared of. It's just they will constantly auto you and auto you and auto you over and over and over again. Freehold's one of the highest auto attack damage dungeons in the game, probably in the season for sure, definitely. So be aware of that. That's kind of your damage intake in this dungeon. So there's no real individual mob to be aware of. It's just all of them are going to hit you, right? Sanguine got a bit of healing there. Unfortunate. And this is actually where we make a mistake. So what we want to do is we want to pull this pack right here to our right. And we send the rogue to do the RP now. But we get walked on by this patrol. So what we should have done is we should have sent the rogue to initially CC the leading mob in our comp, because we don't have another person that could CC a leading mob. We could also have any other player, if you have a group that has any form of CC, like, you know, Hex, Polymorph, Freezing Trap, those kind of things. You want to CC the front mob of this patrol, because you're going to see it Pat's like right up on top of us, and because of Sanguine, we can't stay in one spot, right? We have to start moving a little bit here, and that ends up patting us into this patrol because they come up like right here. Otherwise, this pull, again, is relatively, it's going to be easier than the previous pull, right? You've got a Harpooner in here, you've got 2 kickers, but outside of that, it's just the 1 Scrapper to be on top of, right? And it's not really too scary to deal with, especially because you're going to be with 4 people for most of it, right? Not most of it. Like, the rogue leaves, starts the RP, and then comes back, right? So he's not gone for that long. I think he's just getting back now, right? Yeah. But obviously, like, we're stuck in this corner. We're trying our best not to pull this pack, but then the Sanguine starts dropping, right? And we're trying, okay, we start to have to move to Sanguine. I get Harpoon because I step out of melee range, to be aware of that. And then this, we're going to just body pull this pack and we're going to die. So we should have just CC'd the front member of this patrol and they would have stayed down here. And that would have solved us that entire issue. We'd have had all the space to play this pack with, and that would have stopped the sanguine healing, and it would have stopped, obviously, this wipe. Now, we do still time the key, surprisingly. So we're going to go finish off this pull, what's left of it. And unfortunate that it stayed, but whatever. And the RP is already started here, right? So luckily the RP did already start. The pig's already in here. So we're just adding this one pack that we just ran past, running into the circle here. They're going to deal with the pig. I'm going to add one of the golems on the side here, as well as a bunch of the deckhands. And we're just going to be cleaving here, doing this while we're RPing. And that's kind of the goal of this route, is just be doing a bunch of trash while we're RPing. Like, ideally, we would be doing this trash before the pig RP was even done, right? Assuming we didn't wipe, we'd have started this pull before the pig RP was done. And what you're going to see happen here is we're going to be behind one pull, essentially, in this area because we wiped during the RP. But we're just going to make up for it by doing the pack after the boss. So this pack is going to get the actual turtle added to it, which, again, it becomes a little bit scary because ideally we didn't want to add the turtle to this pull while it was this alive, right? So it's just because we fell behind, it happened that way. And you can see here me kiting essentially to stop as much sanguine healing as possible. That is the goal of this kiting. I'm watching the low health mobs. We're putting stuns out, and then we're moving away from the mobs with the stun on them, and they're just going to die away from the pack with sanguine, and continuously moving. Don't want to leave this crusher soaking into sanguine, getting knocks away on these low health mobs. And again, stunning, slowing, knocking. That is going to be the priority here. Again, stunning that low health mob away from the two big health mobs. And that's how we basically handle sanguine in this. Little crazy, but it's okay. And again, we're going to kill this crusher, and I believe we're going to add a couple more mobs once this crusher dies. Again, moving here as the crusher gets low health to make sure the turtle mini boss does not get any sanguine healing. Adding in a pack here, another 3-pack here, and again, we are 1 pack behind. So we did want to add basically one more the pack up on the bridge, but because we were behind because of that wipe, we're not going to be able to add them. So we're just focusing this pack down. Ludwig's going to die. There's going to be some RP still, and we're going to finish off this pack while the RP for the boss is happening, finishing it just before the boss actually spawns here, 3 seconds. And we probably could have lusted one of these bigger pulls. We actually lost track of lust here a little bit. You likely wanted to just rip lust on a cooldown there. We're ripping it here. It's not the end of the world because this boss can be a bit of a pain with the sharks, right? And depending on your chum RNG, because you see we're getting pretty bad chum RNG here. It's all spawning in melee. And so basically what you can do here is you can have one person kind of assigned to try and like corral the sharks a little bit. There is some weirdness, like sometimes the boss throws 2 sharks at once and then they'll both tick you and you will instantly die. That actually does happen one time in this. And the sharks are a bit annoying. They deal magic damage, so that could be relevant. For example, as a prop paladin, we in this fight, I do spell warding someone while they have 2 sharks on them, and they just sit there and let the sharks hit them because they do no damage through spell warding. So something to note, in terms of random damage, Ripper Punch is not too scary, so really all you're worried about here is the sharks. If you have things like bleed cleanses for the Ripper Punch, you can use it, and honestly, if you have a defensive and you get a Ripper Punch, like there's not really much else to do unless you get murdered by a shark, right? So up to your discretion, whether you want to save a defensive for a shark hit or if you want to use it on a Ripper Punch. But a big thing here with positioning is making sure that you're never between Trothak and a shark, because remember, he will dash out to his shark and re-pick it back up, and that is going to deal a ton of damage. Like in higher tyrannical, it probably will just one-shot you if you get hit by it. Meanwhile, the shark tornado does like almost no damage. But you never want to be between the shark and Trothak, so keep that in mind. And ideally, we have a range kind of like slowly kiting through a couple of these puddles there just to make life a little bit easier. You see our healer has been trying to corral some sharks as well, just on the move, because obviously that's going to be the biggest DPS increase, right? If the healer is the one that has to move a lot and is being chased by the sharks, that's going to save your DPSers from moving in their damage or whatever. Obviously, if you have mobile DPSers, that's a different story. But at least it can save you a decent chunk of damage if you have your healer kind of going around. Like, and there's the spell warding I'm talking about, right? He just gets a spell warding and sits there and lets both sharks hit him. Obviously, the dash would still hit him, so he needs to be careful of that still. But just a little piece of tech you can use. And again, this fight is more kind of annoying than it is super difficult, I would say. But just be aware of it. Those sharks, you better be safe than sorry. You don't want to, get here, especially if you're low on battle reses and lose someone instantly. There's a double shark hit there. Which is, it happens, right? Like sometimes things like that just happen. And so ideally you have some battle reses. Oh yeah, also that happens. Please make Holy Paladin battle res not cost 3 Holy Power, or Paladin battle res, please, I beg. But yeah, the fight becomes a little bit of chaos, but we end up getting it down okay. And we will then do the pack that we wanted to do before. So it's one Crusher with the pack up there. Obviously, we pulled the Crusher up here earlier, but we wanted one more Crusher, so we grab him and we add him to this pack. I think actually we also get hit by the Invisible Crusher AoE here, and that kills a couple people. Yeah, so the ground chatter is just going off, and you have like half the duration or less to react to it there, which was fun, of course. So be aware of that. Watch the Crusher cast. That happens like half the time. It feels like, no idea why, but the Crushers will not show their AoE sometimes until it's very, very late in the cast, so be aware of that. Otherwise, this is like a relatively normal pull, right? You want to watch the Scrappers here, and there's only one Brian skill to kick. We keep this pull alive, though. We end up killing it. And then we will do our skip here, which we're just going to Shroud back and go across the bridge, not pulling any of these packs here, just going right to the bridge. This pack is a pain in the ass because it has double harpooners that can get pretty scary. And we're going to do a big pull here with the Officer and these two packs here with the Stormcaller Ravager and then the other Stormcaller Ravager Oarsman pack. So I'm going to grab the guy up there and we're just going to get our kicks here. The big thing is the actual Painful Motivation Cascade. These are no longer worth letting go through. They've nerfed this like a couple times now in terms of the damage it deals to the mobs that are buffed. And basically now it's just a massive damage amp, and you do not want to play around with it. As I mentioned, tanks are constantly in danger just from auto attacks in this dungeon, and especially this pack, if it goes on the Officer, who also has a massive fire damage tank buster, you are just dead, right? So we really want to make sure that we are stopping these painful motivations, or we're purging them, or enraging them off, that kind of thing. Don't recommend getting hit by a swirly, not ideal. And basically, this is just a nice, big, slightly dangerous pull, so you want to save a lot of defenses for this as a tank here, and we basically just cleave it all down. This spells need to be very, very quick when it comes to the Officer's hit, right? That's like a 75% healing reduction on that hit, so be aware of that. Make sure you dispel it ASAP. Not good to have on your tank. Get as many kicks on those lightning bolts as possible. Again, those are tank targeted, so the more you can kick, the better. Try not to bathe the pack in Sanguine. Obviously, that's going to be extending the pack more than you want. You can slightly backstep there, as you saw the Oiled Blade. It's not going to stop the cast, but it will make him recast it if you get out of range. So just keep that in mind. If you really, really need just an extra second or two before you can mitigate an Oiled Blade, you can try and do a bit of a backstep there to just delay the cast on you a little bit. And then kicking the Painful Motivation on the Officer, stopping or kicking the Painful Motivation. I recommend stopping because we spend a lot of kicks on lightning bolts in this pack. So if you can use stops instead on the Painful Motivations on the other mobs that are stoppable, that is ideal. But this is definitely one of the scariest trash packs in the entire dungeon here. I can definitely see you like committing something like Bloodlust on a fortified week on that pack. But we're going to be just Bloodlusting, I think, late on this boss. We just kind of Bloodlust when we get it. And for this boss, we are going to be doing this trash pack with the boss later on. Initially, we don't want them, so we have the Rogue tap them and vanish, so they don't pull with the boss. And we're going to tank this boss over here until about 60%, because that's when he gets the buff that will make his abilities target more players. And that's when we're going to use the bombs, the cannon barrages, to kill the trash. So we're just over here in this corner, basically. I'm facing the Swiftwind Sabers away from everyone, just into the corner, so no one has to worry about it. You can put 3 bombs down on the ground in one spot before you need to move. Keep that in mind. So that's what we just did there. You can save a lot of space. Not necessary for this part, but it can be very, very useful when you pull the trash. Whirling Dagger, that gets scary later on in the fight again when he's targeting multiple players. Otherwise, we're just using things like knocks, like roots and stuns to deal with these Grenadiers. They have to run a decent distance, so it actually eats up a bunch of their duration when we're in this corner. However, when we start moving to the center of the room, you get a lot less time, right? So you're going to have enough CC to keep them locked down. We use a couple of roots from Evokers for the most part, but we do have like a blank spot or two where we don't have some coverage. So boss is getting down a little bit. We're at 64% here, so we know, okay, we're about we're about a few seconds out of our actual cannon barrage, right? That's our cannon barrage we're looking for, actually doing the boss with, or the trash with rather. So here's the loaded dice coming out. I'm going to stun that guy. Got about 12 seconds. This is the cannon barrage we want to use because he's buffed. He's sub 60%, so it's going to target 4 players. You're going to see now we're moving. Swiftwind Saber goes out, so we now are going to add this pack in. Everyone comes over on top of the pack. And again, dropping 3 cannon barrages. I bubble an AFK in this pack. And then we move quickly out. Because again, Sanguine healing is not ideal. I think we only got like 1 tick of healing of Sanguine on the boss here. So that's kind of what you want to do. That was even a little bit sloppy. Notice you did not need all 4 players in. You only needed 3 players in. One of our players couldn't get in time. That's fine. You did not need every single fireball to hit. I think it was maybe 2, maybe 3 from a player or 2 of the cannon barrages hit the pack and they just died, right? So that is the benefit of doing this with the boss. If your tank can just survive the initial actual pulling of the pack and then the cannon barrages and avoid the cannon barrages if you're not bubbling, right? That's the benefit of Paladin in this dungeon, is you can run in, you can save bubble taunt for this and bubble taunt them inside the actual cannon barrages, which makes you really safe. And it makes it very consistent in killing them all. Very, very good. Otherwise, other tanks will need to be a bit more careful, save a big CD for this, and make sure you aren't in the cannon barrage themselves. But it's just insanely fast, right? Like, what other trash pull that's that dangerous, frankly? Like, this is probably bordering on as dangerous as that pack we did just before this boss on its own. So it makes it insanely safe and insanely fast. Very, very efficient here. And from there, we're just basically doing the boss. We need to do one more pack, which is on the edge here. Again, you could do this with the boss. We opt to just do it after because we're going to have Lust up for that pack, actually. And we didn't want to risk sanguining the boss with that pack. So we just wait to do it after. But in the higher keys, you're probably going to do this with the boss, and then you're going to do this with the boss with the cannon barrage. And obviously, it's likely not going to be Sanguine week on the highest push week, so you won't need to worry about that as well. But that's kind of why we didn't end up doing this pack with the boss itself. Otherwise here, we're just trying to generally like move with a group using alternating CCs on these Grenadiers, so you don't have to really use too much. Again, like I said, we're using mostly roots from the 2 Evokers, but sometimes alternating with stuns. You know, we had blind one time, knocking them, that kind of thing, just to make sure, because like a Hodge is not quite long enough. And basically just moving as like a group here, meeting in the center, moving as a group again after this, and just kind of rinse and repeating for the rest of the fight. Remember, there's going to be a damage amp at 30% here, so keep that in mind. Like our Evokers are having their offensive cooldowns coming up very, very shortly, and they're just going to make sure they use them with that damage amp that comes at 30% HP, and we're just going to use that to kill the boss. And then once we actually do kill the boss, we're going to move to the pack and pop Lust and kill them again. We didn't do that with the boss, but you probably would want to do them with the boss just for speed, just because we didn't do them because of we would have Lust coming up, and because we didn't want to sing with the boss, but this pack's relatively easy. But that is it for this video, guys. Hopefully it helps you guys time some big Freehold keys, and if it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it. Any questions about this dungeon, please feel free to drop those down in the comments below, or come over to my Twitch channel at Tactics and ask me there. I stream all of my key pushing as well as mythic rating from a tank BOV. Would love to have you. Big shout out to all of my subscribers over on Patreon. I couldn't keep making these videos without your support, so thank you. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.